Hello, welcome to the Ramen Otaku Show. What you're about to watch is an enhanced compilation of me reviewing 4 Precure series as well as reacting to Tyranno's video on said subject. The contents include Smile, Doki Doki, Heartcatch, and the newly added Kirakira. Now before we start, I do need to warn you guys, there is going to be an intro that may seem a little bit off-putting at first, but I do have a video link to the actual opening as well as some bonus content, as that stuff could not be monetized despite the song being a commercial failure. Anyways, let's enjoy the video. First off, we're starting with Smile and Doki Doki, the awakening and the fates of the Precure series.
Super fighting robot, Mega Man. 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 Fighting to save the world.
With Rising Ramen Heroes being in development, I decided to watch a Precure series for inspiration, as my series not only needs inspiration from Rockman and Tokusatsu shows, but also magical girls as well, as I wanted to make it enjoyable for everyone. After looking through them, I ultimately decided to choose Doki Doki and then Smile as my beginning to Precure. So let's start with Smile first. In case you don't know, the lighthearted tone was made in response to the earthquake that hit Japan the year prior, which is what makes this series so enjoyable for me. All the characters are lovable and well written throughout the story, the episodes are fun and sometimes comedic, as there's always crazy antics caused by the villains, and while the ending is somewhat mediocre, I really love Smile Precure, and firmly believe that this is what a good Precure show should be. Not everything needs to be dark and gritty all the time, and more importantly, if it is needed, it has to be used appropriately. It's like fast food, it's good once in a while, but having too much of it can cause health problems. While I'm not sure if it'll still stand the test of time, for now, I believe that this series is a great starting point into the world of Precure. Next is Doki Doki. The reason I started with this was because I was very interested in Mana, aka Cure Heart, and I still think she's enjoyable. I've heard that this is a very divisive series, and I could sort of see where they're coming from. Now, while I love all the main characters and even some of the villains being better than Smile, the only character that I didn't much care for is Cure Ace. Now, I'm not saying that I hate her, I just don't find her all that appealing. Her design feels so out of place when compared to the other Cures. I mean, she does have some cool moments, but even in the end, I still didn't find her all that interesting. And I'm sure I'm probably gonna get this in the comments.
But Marcus, isn't she like Lysithea from Fire Emblem?
Now, it is true that both Lysithea and Ace are overpowered child prodigies who love sweets and tries to act mature for their age. But the difference between them is that Lysithea has a way more life-threatening situation when compared to Ace, to the point that she was gonna die. And depending on who Lysithea marries, will result in her either living or passing away peacefully. Have you ever watched the movie A Walk to Remember? I'm willing to bet you haven't, but that's what Lysithea reminds me of, and it makes me want to save her from her untimely death. Honestly, I felt that more time probably could have been spent on Regina, who's way more interesting than Ace, by making her more of a rival turned hero like Mega Man and Base's rivalry. But oh well, I guess they don't want to rehash on fresh Precure. If you like Cure Ace, that's fine. I just wish I could like her, but I can't. But hey, at least the ending is awesome. It's almost like a Fire Emblem ending. And despite these problems that I've addressed, I absolutely love Doki Doki Precure. It may not be perfect, but I'm willing to overlook the negatives since they feel very minor. Now, one final piece of note I should talk about is the English dub of Smile and Doki Doki. And it's bad. There's unnecessary edits, and several episodes are missing due to them having Japanese elements. This is because Saban wanted to make this American-friendly, which even in the 2010s, it's really not necessary. The entertainment landscape has changed, and lots of anime and manga are selling way more in the US than cartoons and comics, because of the cultural aspects of Japan. Back in the day, these localizations were made because companies felt that American audiences wouldn't understand or even enjoy Japanese culture. But now that times have changed, more and more of them are gaining interest and want to learn more about Japan itself. Making these unnecessary Americanized edits not only deprives viewers of the real story, but also gives English dubs a very bad reputation. It's really a shame because some of the voice actors in the dub are from bigger projects like Fire Emblem. If these edits didn't exist, then Precure probably could have had more English dubs. But because of these questionable decisions resulting in negative reception, Precure will remain in Japanese forever. Alright, now that we're done with that, let's go react to Tyranno.
Smile Precure, I'm happy to report, is a good one. It's also, how to put this, the basic Precure, standard. I don't mean that in a demeaning sort of way, mind you. What I'm trying to say is, this is the first season of Precure where absolutely everything felt familiar.
Well, you know, aside from the sequel seasons.
Smile didn't bring much new to the table. It was simply content to take the familiar elements of Precure and just have fun for a while.
Okay, I will not deny that Smile Precure is pretty basic, but in my opinion, I don't think it needs to have all the bells and whistles to make this a spectacular start. Nothing does.
But other than that, I struggle to think of Smile as anything other than a season of Precure. If ever anyone wanted to not necessarily get into Precure, but understand what the series is like and about, this would be the season I would point them to.
Okay, I sort of disagree with his statement. I mean, yes, 5 is also a good start, but I would only recommend it to people who are into old anime, because honestly, I feel that its art style and animation has aged considerably, when compared to Smile, which even right now still looks better. I mean, I still don't know if it will stand the test of time, but regardless, I think Smile has aged rather gracefully. I also think that with its simplicity and style, you could still continue on to the other series like Doki Doki and still enjoy it. It's not just to be used as some one-off.
As I said earlier, this new thematic overlay resulted in less of a focus on developing character arcs over the course of the season, and instead resulted in a greater emphasis on the episodic fun times. To be clear, every season of Precure has always had a healthy dose of episodic fun times, but the past few seasons had been toying with slowly furthering each character's story through the episodic ones. Whereas in Smile, big character beats are saved for dedicated character episodes, if that. Otherwise, the characters are usually just dropped into wacky situations and come out the other end unchanged. The greater focus on episodic fun times wasn't inherently a good or bad thing. Part of the appeal of Precure is just getting comfortable with these characters over an extended length of episodes, so whether the characters are actively growing or just chilling doesn't make that much of a difference, so long as we can engage with them.
Part of me feels like that Tyranno didn't really pay attention to a lot of these episodes, or he was expecting something completely different and forgot that this is a children's show. But honestly, I can't really blame him, since he decided to watch all of the Precure series like the fucking D-pad.
Before we get into the meat of any particular episode, though, I think it would do us good to have a firmer grasp of the characters themselves, so I'm going to do that thing where I spend way too long talking about each of them. Alright, we ready for this? No? Too bad.
Ugh, fine. Such a party pooper.
Nao's kind of the most boring character this season. I really wish I had a nice way to say that.
Fuck you, Nao's a good character. You wouldn't know a good badass girl if it hit you in the face! Literally! Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I don't really know where that came from. But I still disagree.
She has the least going on personality-wise. She's rarely personally tested, and she doesn't really grow. The most we get on that front is her being afraid of bugs, I guess. But otherwise...
Wow. Do you not remember episode 18, 25, 28, and 42? Because those episodes I felt is where Nao grew as a character. But whatever. It's your opinion. What am I gonna do? Okay, anytime Tyranno complains about the simplicity and lighthearted tone, I should point this out. because he probably didn't even know or bother to look up on the Precure wiki, which almost everything has a wiki. The series was made with a much more lighthearted tone than previous installments as a response to the magnitude 9.1 earthquake in Japan that had occurred the year prior. Now, imagine if you were an author and a natural disaster happened. All the homes are destroyed, the entire neighborhood is in ruin, and everyone is feeling sorrow. Do you think making a dark and depressing anime series would lighten the mood? No, obviously not. Though I'm sure you're probably gonna disagree with me on that.
All right, let me just interrupt myself right here. Just point out that this image right here, 10 out of 10, perfect, absolutely love it. Now's redeeming quality is this picture right here. It's fantastic.
Okay, this pose is something I've never understood. How is this offensive to a Western audience? I know it means up yours, but I've never seen it used in an offensive way in any Western media. At all. Maybe it's made up. Maybe it's bullshit! But then again, I'm Japanese, so what the fuck do I know?
Once this is pointed out to her, she spends almost the rest of the season in low-key existential crisis mode, desperately searching for her own desires, her own path. And at the end of that crisis, she learns that sometimes it's okay to be a little selfish.
But not Doki Doki. Don't worry, we'll get to that later.
One of my favorites was episode 35, where we learned that Yayoi is a total Gundam nerd, or a nerd for this universe's fictional equivalent. Not only is her getting excited over a robot toy just adorable, but her passion for this toy franchise informs our understanding of how she approaches her art. This seemingly innocuous passion for a media franchise is actually reflective of how she goes about making her own art. She doesn't just draw, she spends hours toiling over every detail, obsessed with making it as good as can be, which incidentally is the plot of a later episode. This episode is great because it uses a fun premise to inject a little something extra into a character that turns out to be a lot more than meets the eye. Plus, I mean, the rest of the episode is just a riot. All the characters have reactions to Yayoi's obsession that range from really to adopting that obsession. Everything goes off the walls when Miyuki turns into a giant robot and Reika is the only one who can pilot her, which means that Reika is a confirmed new type and you can't change my mind. And then the OP kicks in during the fight, which is like, that almost never happens in Precure, so it's amazing. And I think this is a trope of giant robot shows that Precure isn't making fun of, just adopting and having a good time with it. I mean, I don't really know. I haven't watched all that many giant robot shows, but Gridman did it like every episode and that was great.
Yeah, that one's pretty good. It does something pretty unconventional for a Magical Girl series. And whoever said that Smile wasn't very creative?
Another one of my favorite episodes is 39. This one just had a lot going on. It played into the season's storybook theme by having everyone be sucked into a version of Cinderella and having them play the story out. Miyuki's enthusiasm for her role reinforces her love of stories and fairy tales, and her unwavering determination to see the tale through to the end is evidence for her being single-minded to a fault about the things she cares about. She'd move heaven and earth to see the story through, and that fierce dedication to something as simple as Cinderella is only amplified when everything gets serious to the level of saving the world a few episodes later. But really, we're here for the fun bits.
Yeah, episode 39 is also really good, if not really wacky. It's great that they're playing with the fairy tale theme, even if it's only just once.
While this season was overall fun, there were definitely some misses. Episodes that were neither particularly fun, nor had anything interesting to do with the characters. Episodes like, say,
38.
What? What?
In that episode, the cast are transformed into little toddlers, and then they spend the episode acting like stupid dumb toddlers. And, that's it? Was that supposed to be fun? Because it wasn't. We didn't learn anything new about any of the characters, and the situation they were in did not lend itself well to comedy or any sort of fun. I wish I were exaggerating, but really all they did was dick around until they turned back to normal, and because they were dicking around with the looks and personalities of toddlers, who just can't help but be irritating to anyone but immediate family, I can't help but wonder why the hell this episode even exists. It accomplished nothing character-wise, it wasn't fun to watch, it was just bad.
Episode 38 is one of my favorites! It's really cute and interesting to see what would happen if the Precures became children, and see how strong they are. Not to mention, it also fits with the lighthearted tone. And I am not alone on this. Other people in the comments are also agreeing with me as well. Patrick Grussel says the toddler episode was adorable. What's wrong with you? And then I also replied with the same thing that I just said. Kirakira, God, I hope I said that right, put in one part, says, I actually liked the episode when they changed it to kids. If for nothing else, then it was funny watching them try and fail their attacks. Niva Igaza, I fucking can't pronounce that, says, I actually really liked episode 38. And Florence replies, oh no, episode 38 was one of my favorites. I'm baby crazy, so... See? It's an adorable episode. What's wrong with you?
But then there's the big bad Piero, and his loyal servant Joker. These two have a bit more going on, though admittedly it took another trip to Google to really learn about what was going on with them. To be honest, when I first heard the name Piero, I was convinced that Toei, the animation studio behind Precure, was taking a jab at Studio Pierrot by naming their villain after it, and honestly, I still very much want to believe that, but the internet has more plausible theories. The more plausible theory, and again, pulling from the internet here, so have your grains of salt ready, is that Pierrot and Joker are based on similar characters from the, and pardon my pronunciation, Commedia dell'arte, or Comedy of the Profession. I probably should have looked up how to pronounce that, but fuck it. These comedies, as I'll call them for simplicity's sake, were a form of early Italian theater from the 16th century. While there's a whole lot that can be discussed about these comedies in terms of their history and how they were hugely influential to theater and the arts globally, for our purposes, all we're interested in is the fact that they typically relied on a set of stock characters. These stock characters were typically masked and filled a variety of roles, such as lovers, captains, and fools. One such prominent fool was named Piero. Unusually, the Piero featured in these comedies was unmasked and came to be sort of a sad, solitary figure. At one point. At least, Piero has been many different things and taken many different forms throughout history. I mean, Christ, just scroll through this dude's Wikipedia page. Look at all this shit! Point being, Piero was a stock character, a muse, someone returned to over and over. Given that, Piero is a figure that sort of transcends time. He's lasted for centuries and may last more. This nebulous figure, fool that he is, has influenced and been influenced by centuries of history, so whatever form he takes is sure to be drawn from the knowledge of centuries prior, and whether that affects his character in universe or not, he almost inevitably becomes a reflection of storytelling itself, of what it is and how it's evolved. So his form in Smile Precure, he's not a tangible villain per se, but more a nebulous force, always out there observing and influencing life, even as the people in the world are unaware of him. The show version is also a product of human energy, though instead of being the result of the collective creative energy of centuries of humanity, he's instead derived from centuries of sadness, of tragedies, and stories with, as he would put it, bad endings. This ties back into this season's storybook theming. On top of being about the stories we tell, the main villain himself is the incarnation of every tragic event ever put to paper. Himself a version of a character that has permeated literary history. Fitting, if nothing else. Wow, I sure pulled a lot out of my ass after like half an hour of research. Man, I must look so smart right now.
Wow! You took all that time to do research on the main villain, yet you couldn't take the time to browse the Precure wiki?
Putting that aside, I think that does it for Smile Precure. Overall, it was pretty good. I can't avoid it, can I? Fine. I'll listen to it. I'll talk about it. You monsters. Let's get this over with.
Okay, so now he's going to be talking about both dubs. I already talked about that in my video, so I'm not really going to repeat myself.
If anyone ever asks you what Precure is, between its fun characters, magic fights, and simple fun times, then this season is as good a summary as any.
I think the problem that Tyranno has with Smile is that it's too similar to Yes 5, but simplified and more lighthearted. Now, as I said before, not everything needs to be dark and gritty, nor does a starter series need to have a bunch of bells and whistles to make it spectacular. I still think Smile is a better starting point compared to Yes 5, and I stand by it, because at least Smile's art style has aged better than Yes 5. Oh god, we're already at Doki Doki. Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, here we go. Trying to get fired up for this game.
Okay, I am fully aware that Doki Doki is not perfect by any means. I said that in my review, but I still love it. So, I am ready for the shit that he is about to probably throw at me.
So y'all don't like Doki Doki Precure, huh? That's weird. Me, on the other hand, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Wait, what? You're not fucking with me, are you?
It's got problems, sure, but it's far from the worst. This season has great pacing and a refreshing sense of forward momentum. Its characters are super fun for how exaggerated they are, even if they could use some more fleshing out. I also dug the thematic exploration of selfishness and how that tied into the villains. I know this season isn't liked by, or even for, everyone, but you know what I think. First off, Doki Doki is the best-paced season of Precure. This show has a constant sense of forward momentum, and even the few episodes that aren't actively driving the story forward are either doing some decent world building, or fleshing out the characters, or otherwise doing something to give the sense that something has changed by the end of the episode.
Oh, thank God! I thought I was gonna have to get my rockbuster and pull out some serious shit. But, let's stay focused. Continue.
Incidentally, we find out later that this kingdom, whose salvation is one of the character's primary motivators, is called... Oh dear, it's called Trump Kingdom. As in, wow, look at the ruins of Trump Kingdom. This 2013 show really prophesized what America would turn into.
Prism Moon T says, just to let you know, Trump in Japanese means playing cards. The theme of Doki Doki is cards, thus their name, heart, diamond, sword, etc. Trump Kingdom has nothing to do with America or anything. It's just a kingdom that ties with the cards theme. So hopefully what Tyranno was saying was a joke, and if it's not a joke, then fuck you.
Our lead this time is another enthusiastic pink-haired gal, Mana Ida. Of all the Precure protagonists who fit that description, Mana is the most exaggerated. I mean, I thought Miyuki was a little hyperbolic in her characterization, but Mana just takes her everything up to 11.
Now, I do agree with Tyranno. Mana is similar to Miyuki, but way more energetic. However, the difference between them is that Mana is less clumsy and more helpful, which I think is what makes her shine as bright as the sun. To me, anyway. Now, I'm not saying I dislike Miyuki. I love her as well, but that's the reason why I started with Doki Doki first. And, as Tyranno explained further into the video, Mana's selflessness and her desire to help others is what made me so interested in her.
Her goal of being prime minister one day may be a bit naive given the state of women in Japanese politics.
Google this topic if you want to be sad. The fuck is wrong with you?
If you've been around a while, you probably know my feelings on idols, but just in case, the long and short of it is I think the whole idol industry is kind of creepy, dehumanizing, and fetishistic. So when I see a child character being an idol and more or less glorifying the profession, well, that's just all sorts of weird.
Okay, so I looked this up on Google. How old you have to be a Japanese idol? The idols themselves are teenagers who begin performing at around 13 years old. And Makoto is 14 years old. Tyranno, if you're gonna be complaining about the aspects of Japanese culture, you may as well stop watching anime.
I'm not here to linger on that, just wanted to make sure you had that context. So within this season, the whole idol thing is an outlet for Makoto's love of singing, a means of self-expression, okay, but not always. At first, the gig was simply a means to an end, a way to make herself visible and get a message to a lost friend, an understandable and practical motivation. As soon as that motivation no longer applies, though, Makoto's whole reason for being an idol disappears, and this is where shit gets a little weird. Since that motivation has disappeared, Makoto decides to step down from being an idol and makes it clear that she's not sure she wants to continue doing it and that she needs time to figure things out for herself. Alright, on board so far. But then her friends pressure her into staying on as an idol.
Oh boy.
Makoto made it clear that she wasn't sure she wanted to do it, and yet that concern never seemed to give her friends pause. Instead, all they repeat, and I mean repeat, is that she should keep doing it because they want her to. They like her singing, so she should keep doing it for them, regardless of whether or not she wants to.
It's not about what others want, it's about what she wants. That should be your primary concern, but instead you swing back too.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Okay, I sort of see where you're coming from, Tyranno, but I'm pretty sure, and this is just my perspective, is that Mana and the others were concerned that Makoto wasn't being herself when she wanted to retire from being an idol. Again, that's just how I see it, but I'm pretty sure lots of people are going to disagree with me on that, and that's fine. I'm willing to accept that.
On a less depressing note, we have the last of the main 5, Aguri Madoka.
Oh, okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. Trying to get fired up for this game.
I'm not saying Aguri doesn't have anything of note going on, just relatively little compared to the rest of the cast.
Maybe that could be another reason why I don't find her that interesting, aside from what I said in my video.
All that being said, though, I do have one gripe that applies to all these characters that I'm unsure of the importance of. That gripe is that all of the main characters are important. Well, of course they're important, they're the main characters, but I mean, within their own world, they're important even before the whole Precure thing. Mana is student council president. Alice is the rich heir to a multinational conglomerate. Makoto is a famous idol and the last surviving warrior of a desolate kingdom. Rika is the most normal one of the bunch, but even she has found herself surrounded by a bunch of people high up on the social totem pole. All of these girls were already special within their own lives. This raises the question, why did they, in particular, need to become cures?
I don't know, maybe they were trying something different rather than simply retreading the same ground as the previous series. Wasn't that your complaint in Smile Precure?
More importantly, there's a particular set of episodes in the latter half of the show which I like to call We're All Mothers Now, in which the characters all try to be good moms to a baby. I hate these episodes.
Wow, do you kiss your mother with that mouth? Alright, look, motherhood isn't something that interests me in Precure, nor is it something that I'll add in Rising Ramen Heroes, but you need to understand in Japanese culture that women always get to put on the big boots. That's just the way it is.
So King Selfish is that, but even bigger this time. He's actually the old king of Trump Kingdom, whose daughter was dying and the only way to save her was by taking hold of some ancient knowledge, but by doing that, he would unleash an ancient evil that would bring his entire kingdom to ruin. Now there's the classic moral conundrum there, the needs of the many versus the needs of the few.
Or the one.
His daughter is saved for that moment, but then the ancient evil takes him over and he becomes the big bad and destroys everything. By choosing to prioritize saving one life over ensuring the well-being of all, he accidentally ensured that everyone was doomed. King Selfish made the selfish decision, and to be clear, I'm not faulting him for that. It was an impossible choice, and suffering would have resulted no matter what he did. But because he made a selfish choice, with the greatest of ramifications, saving one while putting countless others in peril, the ancient evil was able to exploit the guilt that doubtless swelled in him because of that choice, so that ruin was brought to all anyway. The great irony here is that his daughter, as he knew her, didn't get to survive anyway. She lives on in some form, but who she was is lost forever, just as she would have been if the king had prioritized his kingdom and its people in the first place. So from a logical, utilitarian perspective, since he lost both his daughter and his kingdom instead of just his daughter, the king made the wrong choice. But that doesn't make him an evil person. After all, to be selfish isn't necessarily to be evil. We all have a little selfishness in us. That's just human nature. And sometimes it can get the better of us. Love can make us do stupid, selfish things. And the king only wanted to protect what he loved. He's not and never was evil for loving his daughter. Only unfortunate in that he was forced to make an impossible choice and had his desires turned against him.
I think that's another issue with Doki Doki. The origins of Cure, Ace, I, and Regina is incredibly convoluted. But then again, as I said in my review, Toei probably didn't want to do the same thing with Fresh Precure and ultimately decided to make something different. I mean, it could have been worse, but that's something I don't want to think about. Also, this text that you just put here, thank you. Now I'm fucking hungry.
So that, all finally, is Doki Doki Precure. I enjoyed it. And I know that's somehow a controversial statement, but it's true. Sure, it's got flaws aplenty, it's got one of the weaker main casts in the series, and can be inconsistent with its pacing, but I liked it. Flaws and all. The faster pace and less episodic structure were refreshing to me, even if the show wasn't consistent about it. I loved the characters and all their hyperbole, even if they could have done with a little more fleshing out. The consistent exploration of selfishness, both during the episodic monster brawls and among the main villains, was great. I get that this season isn't for everyone, that's fine, but as for me, god damn it, this is Precure, and I couldn't help but have a grand old time. Worst season? Hell no, bitches. This show was...
That's right, it's damn fucking good and no one's gonna tell me otherwise!
God! Jacket's fucking hot! Eh.
And that's it. Also, he didn't mention the Doki Doki movie, so I'll come out and give my opinions of it. I did enjoy it, but my only complaint for that movie is that I felt the main villain could have been presented and executed better, because it's literally a haunted clarinet. Also, after reading some of the comments on his Doki Doki video, it seems that most people are starting to warm up to it as if it has aged like a fine wine. And I'm actually glad. I think the reason why people didn't like it at first might have been either Mana or Aguri as characters, but what people failed to appreciate was the message it was trying to tell, which was the act of selflessness and love. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but what am I supposed to do? So now that we're done with Smile and Doki Doki, let's move on to... Heartcatch. Widely regarded by many as the best Precure series of the entire franchise, having an amazing reception and making a buck ton of money, so after watching this series, what do I think? I think Heartcatch is an okay series. Now, I know what you're thinking.
What are you, fucking stupid?
But I'll get to the bad stuff later. Let's talk about the good stuff. The art style designed by Umakoshi Yoshihiko deserves a lot of praise. It can be strange and unique, but also cute and comedic, making the characters expressive in a very enjoyable way. It's certainly something I can take inspiration from. And the episodes I enjoyed the most being episode 18, which was about a manga artist, and episode 28 being very clever in its message about summer homework. But those are the only episodes I really enjoyed, and overall that's pretty much the good stuff about the series. And now for the bad stuff. Oh boy, I don't think you're gonna like this. My biggest issue with the entire series is the slow pace. The series starts off with Cure, Blossom, and Marine, but 2 more Cures do show up over the course of the series. But it takes too long! How long does it take for the 3rd Cure to show up? About 23 to 24 episodes. How long does it take for the 4th Cure to be revived? About 33 to 34 episodes. And the build-up to it didn't even feel rewarding. Now let's compare this to Delicious Party in its Cure introductions, which for Cure Spicy only took about 4 episodes, and for Cure Yum Yum only took about 3 episodes. Now the pacing for that isn't as off-putting at first, but it isn't as slow, making it more acceptable for me. And let's not forget the best part that everyone probably jerks off to. This series is the genealogy of the Precure series, as in season, there are a lot of dark and depressing moments, way more compared to the future series. The slower pace along with the abundance of drama-filled moments just didn't make the series enjoyable for me. Rather than being emotionally invested in the story, I found myself wanting to either snooze or watch something else, which I ended up having to watch Kirakira in between, because the time I spent watching Heartcatch, it felt like all the love and fun inside of my heart that enables me to enjoy anime and games as well as create my own art was being sucked out, turning me into a dull husk. And that is most certainly not something you'd want in an anime or a game. You can argue all you want saying that a slower pace makes for a more compelling series, or even call me a Miyamoto scumbag for favoring simplicity and casual fun over complexity and depth. But that does not change my opinion of this style of storytelling. In conclusion, Heartcatch is an okay series. It's not number one in my book, but definitely not the worst anime I've wasted my time watching. I would only recommend this to people who enjoy slow-paced anime or is looking for inspiration in their art style and animation. Now that we're done with that, let's go watch Tyranno's review.
Heartcatch Precure is so fucking good.
Yeah, you could probably tell this reaction video is gonna be good just from the opening of it.
Thus far, Heartcatch Precure is the best season of Precure. It's so good that it justifies the existence of the previous seasons while simultaneously rendering them irrelevant. This season would not exist without every season that came before, so in that sense their existence is justified. But this season is so much better than them that you might as well not even watch the rest and just watch this one.
Not true! I still think Smilin' Doki Doki is better!
I'm not saying Heartcatch is perfect, nothing is after all.
Okay, that's a relief. Calling this series perfect is probably more than enough to piss me off.
The delicious inner filling, the most nebulous part to pin down, is made from the attitudes and voices of the creators, and how their voices somehow managed to break through the heavily marketable mold that Precure is usually forced into.
So what you're probably saying is the Precure staff was going through some rebellious, angsty teenager phase? Yeah, that makes sense.
And the bottom layer is a greater focus on narrative, keeping the balance between the slice-of-life moments and fights of the previous seasons, while still adopting an accelerated, more exciting pace.
What balance? What pace? As far as I'm concerned, there was way more emotional dark drama than any Precure series. Is that what you call balance? Cause to me, it's about as balanced as an obese person! And yet people wonder why America has a health problem.
Together, these elements form a delicious dessert of a season, the taste of which, when eaten all together, is, well...
Alright, it's confirmed. Tyranno's insane.
The simpler designs allow for more fluid animation, while the bright colors still provide eye candy in more static scenes. Together, that means these characters are never boring to look at.
Okay, it's true about the art style, and as I said, it deserves a lot of praise. However, in his last part, I disagree, because, as I said in my review, I found myself being bored watching the entire series. I'm sure at the time they weren't boring, but now in the year 2022, they are boring to me.
As a result, no fight is boring. I ended up looking forward to all of them.
Well, that's good for you. You're emotionally invested in the series, whereas I barely tried to give a damn.
This is a fun show after all, and I want to keep having fun, so let's discuss some more fun.
Tyranno, let me just say right now, you have a very different perspective on the definition of fun. Though I guess that's just my opinion.
Let's get back into a positive headspace, shall we? It's time for Yuri Tsukikage, the most straightforward badass in Precure.
You mean the most boring Precure of the entire series? Yeah, that's right, I fucking said it! Fight me! Oh my god, I think I'm starting to turn into Ego Raptor.
Heartcatch has the best pacing and overall narrative structure of any season of Precure thus far. Basically, this time around, there's a greater number of episodes where important plot things happen. As a result, there's a sense of momentum present this season not felt previously.
Fuck you! The pacing was incredibly slow, I barely felt any momentum at all, and I even started to question myself if watching this series to the end was even worth it. And it didn't even feel rewarding at all! It felt like I was wasting my time playing an M-rated game that would take upwards of 80 hours. I would much rather play Mega Man 7 than rewatch Heartcatch again!
Precure usually maintains a healthy balance between slice-of-life antics and monster-of-the-week battles, but rarely do any of those antics or battles have any bearing on the narrative or characters. Here, though, they interact with each other, and as a result, the average episode winds up feeling just a little bit more important. For instance, the introduction and fleshing out of the main characters is more spread out. In previous seasons, every girl was introduced and made a cure very near the start of the season. Here, though, a character's introduction and their becoming a cure do not necessarily correlate. Main character Tsubomi naturally becomes a cure in the first episode, but her best friend and second main character Erika doesn't become a cure until episode 3, allowing plenty of time for the show to flesh out their relationship before piling on the Precure stuff on top of it. Itsuki is introduced in episode 3, but only becomes Cure Sunshine in episode 23. The benefit of this was that it allows her becoming a cure to act as the climax of all the drama that had been building around her, which is much more satisfying than a simple, oh, she's a cure immediately now. Saw that coming. And then it's a whole 10 episodes after that before Yuri returns as Cure Moonlight. Sorry, I mean... Similar to Itsuki, her return is the culmination of all her drama, so yeah, that's cool. As a result of spreading out the joining of the team members like this, there's a lot more episodes in the interim that deal with drama or plot stuff directly related to the main characters. Big character moments are built up to over numerous episodes instead of happening very quickly. Because of all that, this season had a momentum to it that kept me much more engaged with it than I had been with any previous season.
You think the slow pace is a good thing? Is that supposed to be fun? Cause it wasn't fun for me even when I tried being patient. Okay, since you like slow pace, I'll use time slow!
Oh yeah, if you want you like that slow momentum, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so we can generate that ad revenue. This is so much fun. Who cares about going fast when you can go slow? Slow speed is what's hip with the kids nowadays.
Heartcatch is the best Precure in every conceivable aspect.
No, it's not. Fuck you. Okay, maybe that was a little bit too harsh.
And the pacing and structure of the season kept me more engaged than I ever have been with the series.
Except me, cause I hated it.
It's delicious. Just like cake.
No, it's not delicious. If anything, it's a fucking Big Mac from McDonald's. Now that will give you some diabetes and a heart attack, instead of a Heartcatch. So overall, very different reception, and maybe that could be the difference. Maybe me and anyone else who enjoys Smile and series like that are the sun and enjoys the light-hearted simplicity with a nice flowing pace of a story, while Tyranno and everyone else who enjoys Heartcatch are the moon who favors the dark and depressing and the serious aesthetics. Overall, I think you can understand our views of storytelling, but at the end of the day, there's really no definitive way of telling a perfect story. I'm sorry if I upset you, but that's just really how I feel about Heartcatch. The slow pace and the drama just wasn't for me. If you enjoyed Heartcatch, that's great, but as for me, this was not my cup of tea. Now, we can finish it off with Kirakira. So just as Mahotsukai Precure tries to go back to its basic roots, quite further to the early days of magical girls, Kirakira tries to go back to the Super Sentai concept that first started in Yes 5, while also changing up the formula. So is it good? It actually is! Right off the bat, it's really adorable. My favorite characters have been Cure Whip, who's way more endearing than Sailor Moon, Cure Gelato being the most creative character in Precure history so far, as she's both a rock star and a noble lady. And that's not really something you'd normally see in most media. And finally, Ryo and Biberi, who start off as villains, but later on get their redemptions during the course of the story. I actually found myself connecting to Ryo a lot more. It's a shame that he isn't around a lot. Now for the changes to the formula. I didn't mind abandoning the Monster of the Week format because it can get kinda tiring, but what about the lack of physical hand-to-hand combat? At first, I was worried that it would ruin my enjoyment, as Precure has always been known for its epic fight scenes, which stands out compared to most magical girl series in the community. But in actuality, it didn't really matter. It could be because I played so much Rockman where he constantly relies on his Rockbuster as well as his array of special weapons. The lack of physical combat probably should have been in Mahotsukai since they were trying to go back to the early days of Magical Girls, but I guess Toei had different ideas. Now, even though I would have preferred to have physical combat for this series, I was willing to let it slide, but hopefully this won't happen in future series unless there's a good reason for the lack of it. Overall, I actually had way more fun with Kirakira compared to Heartcatch, as the pacing was good, there weren't too many dark dramatic moments, and I was way more invested in the story, whereas in Heartcatch, I was completely bored out of my mind and didn't care what happened next. While it isn't as perfect as Smile and Doki Doki, it did certainly remind me of them, especially with the message they were trying to tell. And those sweets, oh my god, I want to eat some of them. In conclusion, Kirakira Precure à la mort is really good. Alright, now that we're done with that, let's go see what Tyranno has to say. I'm expecting the complete opposite because he probably has no love inside of him.
I was apprehensive when I started writing this video. I came out of Kirakira Precure thinking I didn't have any strong opinions about it, but then when I finished writing the video, it was just over 8,700 words. So in retrospect, my apprehension was not that I didn't have anything meaningful to say about it, but rather something like this.
I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
Yeah, this is gonna be a good one, I bet.
The focus this time around isn't going to just be on what this season did, but rather on what it tried to do, what it could have done better. Because while there are a few stellar elements mixed into this season, there's a whole lot more that just aren't, but could have been.
Ah, great. Now we're going into Arlo territory.
Like usual, we're going to start off with the cast. They're emblematic of the entire season. There's some great ideas mixed in that occasionally shine through and make everything amazing, but taken as a whole, they're just sort of whatever.
Yeah, well, I think the Heartcatch cast is whatever! Okay, maybe that was a little bit too harsh. Let me rephrase that. The Heartcatch cast is completely forgettable.
Let's take it one at a time, starting with Ichika Usami. Ichika doesn't have a whole lot to set her apart from other Precure Pinkies. Her most unique element doesn't really affect her personality or behavior outside of the 2 or 3 episodes where it's relevant, but when that one element does come into play, it does, however briefly, lend Ichika some much-needed depth. I am, of course, referring to her parental problems. Ichika's mother is absent for most of the season. She's a doctor who works overseas to save lives in underdeveloped communities with poor healthcare infrastructure, meaning that as of this moment, a few years after the season finished airing, she has died of coronavirus. Oops.
The fuck is wrong with you?
Her mother's absence is pretty much the first thing we learn about Ichika, right in episode 1. From there, we learn that she also has a bit of a contentious relationship with her father. She might be the first Pink to ever display signs of teenaged rebellion. I want to say that this is one of her defining elements, the thing that makes her stand out from every other lead in the series, but this facet of her character is never explored to a wholly satisfying degree. Ichika's parental problems don't meaningfully affect her personality or behavior outside of the very few Ichika-centric episodes where those problems happen to be relevant, which is like 3 or 4 at best. There's episode 1, the introduction, episode 11, the one with Daddy, and another one, I'm sure. But outside of those episodes, those problems may as well not exist. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's try to examine those problems in their relevant episodes. Ichika's core emotional conflict during the first episode stems from love. She has to reconcile her desire for her mother to be in her life against her mother's need to be a globe-trotting hero. It's a relatable personal conflict that sets Ichika up as someone who's not immune to indulging in self-centeredness, but whose heart is ultimately in the right place. She wants what's best for her loved ones, even if what's best for them isn't exactly what she wants. And then there's the dad episode and her teenaged angst. She's been spending episodes essentially striking out on her own, doing her own thing, and then her dad comes barging in, acting like any cute, embarrassing dad should, reminding Ichika that she's still a kid despite everything she's been up to. There's the inevitable conflict between the kid growing up, outgrowing the need for their parents, and the parents wanting to hang on to said kid forever. It's a part of growing up, being embarrassed by a parent striving for independence, and Ichika has to come to learn that being independent and still loving her father don't have to be mutually exclusive. Through all of that, we can see that Ichika's going through a whole lot of growing pains. She struggles with selfish desires and yearns for personal freedom. She struggles to fill those desires while still being a kind and reliable friend to those she cares about. So how do all of those struggles affect Ichika on a day-by-day, episode-by-episode basis? Well, they don't. Not really. And that's the problem.
Now there's your problem.
The Ichika outside of those few episodes is a very by-the-numbers Precure lead, very caffeinated and enthusiastic and loves helping her friends and all that, and those personal problems of hers never seem to meaningfully affect her personality or behavior in the rest of the season. Like, if you were to skip those few episodes, based on how she acts in the rest of the season, you'd never guess that she faced those problems. The thought of doing something for her own benefit that might not also benefit her friends never so much as crosses Ichika's mind. I hate to say this, but it's almost as if the Ichika of those few episodes and the Ichika of the rest of the season are different characters. Almost. What this really does is hurt Ichika's believability as a character, hurts my ability to buy into the notion that these problems are important obstacles in her life. After all, if these problems don't manifest in her in some way outside of those 2 or 3 brief instances where they're directly relevant, how can I be sure that these problems are actually meaningful to her? They have no weight and thus no staying power. The most that can be done with Ichika's problems is left implied instead of explored. As we'll discuss later, a common theme among the villains is loneliness. Since Ichika struggles with loneliness thanks to the absence of her mother, she could have personally related to them, reached some understanding with them through that commonality. But she never does. Her problems are never made relevant in any of the episodic stories. They never meet someone whose emotional baggage gets turned into a monster of the week, that baggage being loneliness, so that Ichika can be like, hey kid, I know what you're going through, and lashing out isn't the answer, or anything like that. At most, her mother goes on to inspire Ichika's ultimate dream at the end of the season, but even that doesn't stem from her emotional hang-ups so much as, gee, my mom sure is cool and inspiring. In short, Ichika's emotional hang-ups lack any impact because they're never explored beyond the surface level. They're left explained to the barest minimum and never revisited, and that's just a shame.
Alright, I get where you're coming from. But this show is not about parental issues. It's not the main theme. I feel like you're clinging onto Heartcatch way too much, whereas I am trying to get rid of it because it was too much for me. You're looking way too much into this, dude. Chill out!
Himari is fine, but then simply being fine is not nearly enough.
And there he goes again with the Arlo bullshit. Being fine is not enough.
Next is Aoi Tategami. Aoi is the bluest blue that ever did blue.
Damn right she is!
Aoi is, I don't fully buy her. She's a strange mix between 2 archetypes, the rockin' teenager and the rebellious princess, the latter of which seems more tacked on and less fleshed out than the other, there to add a twist that doesn't really say anything.
Probably because you've never seen a character like her. She's one of a kind. At least in Precure history, that is. And that's what I really love about her. I mean, would you much prefer her to be a J-pop idol? You know, the one thing that you constantly whine and complain about like a fucking miserable weeb?
Ditch the crown, girl, you ain't no princess, you're a rebel.
I think that's supposed to be a reference to The Lion King. What, you never watched The Lion King?
When you lay it all out like that, you might not think there's any problem here, and I really want to agree with you. But something about how the season executed on all of this just doesn't quite sit right with me. Like, okay, when she's first introduced, all we know about Aoi is that she's the rockin' girl, right? The whole first core goes out of its way to exclusively focus on that aspect of her character. Indeed, that aspect is established to be her whole and not just a part. For that time, she is just the rock star. And it gives us good enough reason why, too. She's got an idol. When she was younger, she witnessed a rock concert, saw this woman go ham on stage and was like, sick, I want to be that. And you know what? That's good enough. Inspired by a hero, pursuing a dream, and troubled chance encounters with that hero, that's plenty to sustain her arc throughout the season, and indeed is usually the focus of Aoi-centric episodes. I would have been fine with just that. But then episode 14 happens. In episode 14, Aoi's jamming out on stage during a concert when suddenly she gets kidnapped by her butler half-brother because, oh my, how unbecoming of a lady. Thus, this whole extra dimension of this character, what should be a huge, majorly impactful element of her life, is framed as a quick, sudden narrative twist.
どなたですか？あたしだよ。あ、お、いい。
Because of its lack of any sort of presence earlier and sudden introduction, this whole aspect of Aoi's character ends up feeling largely unimportant and superfluous. Like, we don't need Aoi to put on a whole concert for her rich family just to tell us, this is a rebellion.
I rebel.
Because that's already a well-established element of her character that this new element doesn't really add anything to.
So what you're saying is you'd rather have her character arc go on longer than have this sudden twist of a surprise. Look, I love Aoi, but if there's anything I've learned in Heartcatch, is that a slow pace does not make for a compelling story.
Even better, toward the end of the season, it turns out that Aoi's parents were fine with her being a rock star the whole time, rendering her whole conflict with her butler brother sort of moot. That's a weird choice, man.
Probably because we all thought she was gonna have to inherit the family business because, you know, she's their biological daughter.
There's a multitude of ways this could have been alleviated. Perhaps some brief, isolated moments of the rich life during the first cour to better establish it earlier as motivation for rebellion, as opposed to that part of her life being a cheap twist. But I ain't here to write fanfiction for you.
Well, you should write fanfiction because clearly you seem to be very confident in how you want to tell a story.
There's definitely ways to make a major element of a character's life into an effective narrative twist, but this ain't it, Chief.
Fuck you, Aoi's perfect the way she is.
I just want to take a moment to mention how, of all the Precure seasons whose thing is having a big group of 5+ mains, the Kirakira group definitely has the weakest group dynamic. Like, some pairs of characters will have distinct relationships with each other, but the 5 and eventually 6 never felt like a cohesive whole. There's some pairs of characters that I'm not sure they ever exchanged more than 10 lines of dialogue throughout the season, leaving it up in the air whether or not those pairs could actually be considered friends. And besides that, there is a pretty clear divide where Yukari and Akira, being the two high schoolers, seem a little distant from Ichika, Himari, and Aoi. At least of those two groups, the characters in either seem closer with each other than with members of the other. I recall how in Yes 5, when they had two cast members from different cliques who didn't seem like they'd get along, the show forced them together in order to flesh out their relationship. But here, nah. As a result, this doesn't feel like a close-knit group of friends who would do anything for each other like in previous seasons. Instead, they're just acquaintances with some common interests who enjoy each other's company, but not much more than that. So that kind of sucks.
Honestly, I don't think it matters, especially when you have to write about 49 episodes. And we're skipping the Yuri shit because it's not canon.
So this season is probably one of the more thematically consistent Precure seasons in a good while. It's got one thing it wants to explore, and boy, does it do it a lot. It's the baking season, ladies and gentlemen. Put on your aprons and preheat your ovens, because we've got some sweets to make. This season is very upfront about its intentions from the very first episode where it— oh god, what is this 3D bullshit? What the fuck? No!
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
Oh my god, you are such a fucking baby, you know that?
Plus, on at least one occasion, this season commits the one cardinal sin that's committed by every narrative ever where cooking something for someone is a plot element. The secret ingredient was love. Just— no. Can we just agree that's dumb and move on?
Wow! You are legitimately acting like the bad guy here. Has Smile and Doki Doki's message not reached your heart? It probably must be, because clearly you have no love inside of you.
Okay, fuck. I think I'm done. That was a whole lot more discussion than I thought I'd wrangle out of this, and I'm sure you want me to stop, so here I am stopping. In sum, this season was a lot like your bag of candy after a long night of trick-or-treating. You've got some good sweets in there, but then you've got some candy corn, which is just absolutely disgusting, and then some asshole put a toothbrush in there, and you can't help but chuckle at the sheer audacity of that, and I am not making sense anymore. Some of the season is fine is what I'm saying. And that, my friends, is that.
So, in conclusion, he thinks Kirakira is a mixed bag of good, bad, and everything in between. And that's sort of true, but I think it's better than Star Twinkle, which was way more polarizing for me compared to any other series I've watched. Again, I think you can see our difference in how we view storytelling, where one disagrees with the other, but I will not deny that the overall message that Kirakira was trying to present is absolutely amazing. Well, that's it for the Ramen Otaku Show. I think I'm gonna take a break from watching old Precure shows, since I need to wait for Delicious Party to return, and I really need to not only prepare for Kawaii-Con, but also do some comic work as well. So there's Go Princess, Healing Good, and Hugoto, one of which I'm saving for last. So yeah, just 3 to go for the old ones. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I shall see you all next time. Bye-bye!